In this episode, I'm going to be talking all about sinking funds. Stay tuned, I'll be right back. Welcome back to The Long Run with Joel and Christy. I'm Joel, flying solo today, and I'm going to be talking to you today about sinking funds. We use sinking funds for expenses that are coming up later on that either we know about or we don't know about, because we don't want things to catch us by surprise. So we set up sinking funds to help alleviate those things that might catch us by surprise somewhere down the road. I know you've probably heard about sinking funds before, but I just want to show you how we use them to help alleviate going into debt. So I want to tell you what sinking funds are not. Number one, they're not your baby emergency fund. If you follow the Dave Ramsey style, or he talks about having a baby emergency fund and a 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So it's not your baby emergency fund. That is for things that happen that you haven't planned for. So if you put $1,000 into a baby emergency fund, that money stays there unless you have an emergency that you haven't already planned for. So we're going to try to use sinking funds to help alleviate the need for the baby emergency fund, or so that you don't have to touch your baby emergency fund unless you just absolutely have to and there's something that you haven't planned for. So it's not your baby emergency fund. It's also not your 3 to 6 month emergency fund. It's not your 3 to 6 month salary fund that you're encouraged to save up for, because that is specifically for, in our opinion, is specifically for living expenses in case you lose your job, in case something comes up that you need to live off a certain amount of money for a certain amount of time. That's what that money is for. So you don't want to touch that for emergencies that may come up, because you know you're still going to have to put that money back. So in order not to touch those two types of funds, then you need to set up sinking funds to help alleviate that process. Because what happens is, if you're not ready for something when it happens, then you're more than likely going to go back into debt and start repeating that cycle all over again. So for us, sinking funds helps break the cycle of debt, and it helps to give us peace of mind knowing that if something is going to come up, then we're going to be ready for it. So we try to think of all the things that could come up and surprise us, and so we set a sinking fund to help alleviate those expenses, or things that we know are going to come up, like Christmas and car insurance and things like that come around every 12 months or every 6 months, or something we know that's coming up on a repeated basis. We set up a sinking fund for that, so when the time comes to pay that bill, the money's already there and I don't have to worry about where it's coming from. And so we're going to talk about those today. Sinking funds are not your baby emergency fund. It's not your 3 to 6 month emergency fund. So what is a sinking fund? What is it? Well, number one, it's a way to get out of debt. If you're setting up sinking funds to help alleviate those unexpected expenses, they're a way to help you get out of debt because you're not constantly going back into debt. It's also a way to stay out of debt if you're already out of debt, because you're expecting those things to come up. You're saving the sinking funds, you're putting money into those sinking funds, and so when those things happen, you're ready for them, and you don't have to go back into debt. You don't have to go into debt to pay for Christmas. Let me say that again. You do not have to go into debt to pay for Christmas. Set the money aside. You'll be better off for it, and you'll have better control over your money, and the things that you want to buy for other people, you can set that money aside and be ready for that when September, October, November rolls around. You'll be ready to buy those things with the money you've already saved up. So it's a way to get out of debt, it's a way to stay out of debt, and it's also a way to plan for things before they happen. One of the reasons we go into debt is that things come up that we're not expecting. $1,200 car repair, house repairs that we're not ready for, things that sometimes are out of our control. Like, you don't know that a certain thing's going to go wrong in your car until it goes wrong. But if you got the sinking fund set up, you're already ready for it. So it's a way to plan for life before it happens, and it doesn't catch you off guard. I want to kind of reiterate that. Your emergency funds are not your sinking funds. Don't get those two mixed up. From our perspective, you want to keep your emergency funds, and then you set up these sinking funds to handle life as they happen. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a budget and you're going to see it on my computer screen. I'm going to set up a test budget that shows how we kind of do sinking funds, kind of give you an idea how to do it, and then how that you can do that as well to help plan for life before it happens. Now we use YNAB, and I just set up this test budget just to show you how this can be done. But we do use YNAB, so if you use anything else, it's going to look a little different for you, but it pretty much all works the same. So what we've done here is we've got a lot of different categories that you can use. You see there's your rent, your mortgage, your electricity, your water, internet, all of those things. I don't have anything in these categories because we're talking about sinking funds today, so I'm just going to show you how to set some of those up and how we do it. So we put our sinking funds down at the bottom. Here you have, as I've said before, your sinking funds are not your baby emergency fund. You should have money in there, so we're going to put $1,000 in there. And then your 3 to 6 month emergency fund, that's also not your sinking fund. You can use money from there, but you know you always got to put that back because you always want to have that 3 to 6 month emergency fund there to just in case you lose your job or something goes terribly wrong and you need to live off that money for a little while. That's what that money is for. So don't use that like a sinking fund. Use it for only for those things that you need it for. That's for your 3 to 6 month emergency fund, like living expenses. So we set up our baby emergency fund like, I don't know, a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, and we haven't touched it. So we have $1,000 in our account. We know we have $1,000 in our account that's always going to be there unless we have to use it for some kind of emergency. But we haven't had 2.5 years. We haven't had to use that yet. So it's still sitting there. And so we set these down here at the bottom. I do think of car insurance as a sinking fund, and so we budget like $125 a month. Whatever you can divide it up, whatever your insurance premium is for 6 months, divide that by 6, and that's how much you need to put into your sinking fund. So you have enough money there for your car insurance when it comes around every 6 months. And so if you do that, if you pay your premium every 6 months rather than every month, you'll save money in the long run because they're charging you $1, $2, $10 extra to pay it monthly. So if you pay it every 6 months, then that number is going to be a little bit lower. So you can get a break on your car insurance by paying it every 6 months if you set up a sinking fund to save up that money until you need to pay it every 6 months. So that's what we've been doing for the last couple of years, and we saved money on our car insurance because we pay it every 6 months. And so some people put dining out into their budget, and that's fine. It's here in this category just in case you want to set a sinking fund for dining out. Then you can always move that into your budget if you want to do that. New car repairs should always be a sinking fund. We're going to put a couple $1,000s into that. And whatever you can budget each month for these things, then that's what you can do. So like this month, if we had $2,000 in the account and then we wanted to budget $400 every month, the next month we'd go in and we put in $400 more into the sinking fund, and that would make that $2,400. And then the next month we do another $400 and make it $2,800. And so you can see how that continues to build each month until you need to use it. And so if you're setting these sinking funds up and then putting money into them each month, then when you get around to where you need a new car, you need a repair, you can pay for it with cash. And we did that recently with a car repair that we had. It was going to cost us $1,200, and we decided to just use the money from the sinking fund to pay for that. And so it didn't cost us anything out of our budget because we had the money there already to take care of it. Another one that we set up for is Christmas gifts. So we're thinking about Christmas gifts all throughout the year, and so every month we budget a certain amount. So you're going to budget $25. So you know you're going to spend $1,000 on Christmas gifts this year. How do you not go into debt by doing that? Set up a sinking fund and start putting it. It's kind of like you did in the old days in the bank. If you were in the old days, I was in the old days, so I saw my mom and dad do this. But they used to have what they call a Christmas club at the bank. And so every month you can go and make a deposit into your Christmas Club account. And then at the end of the year, you go and pull that money out and you use it to buy your Christmas gifts. Well, this is the same idea, but it's kept in your account, not at the bank. And so, um, so you say you want $1,000 for Christmas gifts this year, then you're going to budget, somewhere around, $900, not 900, $90 a month for your sinking fund. So when you get to Christmas time, so if you want to run that January through October, so you can buy your gifts sometime in November, then you want to do $100 a month. And that way, by the time you get to October, you got $1,000 in that account, and you can use it for your Christmas gifts, and you never have to go into debt that way. And so, setting things up like that, you're saving money in the long run because number one, you're not going into debt to do these things, and then number two, if you have an account that gives you interest, like our checking account does, then every time you put money in there, you're making money because you're going to be drawing interest off the money in your account. So you sit down these different accounts here and you begin saving up and you begin saving up and you're saving up and you're saving up, and sooner or later you realize I got all these accounts with all this money in it that I can use for these particular things. Now I know what some of you are thinking. Well, what about if I have to wham? You know what wham stands for? Wham stands for whack-a-mole, which means I'm taking from one account and I'm putting into another to help cover some expenses. Well, you can do that if you want to. If you know that you've got something coming up, say you have a medical bill that you need to pay for, but you got $2,400 in your car repairs and you need money to pay for a medical emergency that you haven't saved up for, you can either use your baby emergency fund, or you can whack-a-mole from you can wham from one of your already accounts and then use that for that, but then make sure you put that money back in there at another time. So hopefully your baby emergency fund and your 3 to 6 month emergency fund will help you stop the whack-a-mole or the whamming as much as possible, but there will still be times when you may have to do that. Some people call it rob Peter to pay Paul, or whatever you want to call it is fine. Just know that there's sometimes your budget is fluid. It's a work in progress, and so it's always going to be there for you to make changes along the way. Don't treat it as a rigid thing, and don't treat it in such a way that you can't roll with the punches. That's one of the four tenets of YNAB, or you need a budget, is that you need to roll with the punches. Just know that your budget is fluid. Give every dollar a job. Know that your budget is fluid, and that you can make changes along the way if you need to. If you need to put more money into a sinking fund than you were the month before, then you can do that. Or if you need to not put as much into a sinking fund this month because you need to put more into your rent or your internet expenses or maybe even your groceries, then you can do that as well. So just know that a budget is just a guide for you to go by. You can adjust it each month. I would encourage you to look at your budget each month and adjust it as you need to. But also, in the end, setting up sinking funds to make sure you're covering all of those expenses that are going to come up throughout the year so that you don't have to go into debt. That's the biggest thing. The biggest thing about going into debt is those unexpected expenses that we're not ready for. And so if you're setting up sinking funds for those things, then you'll be more ready to take care of those things and take on those things when they come and they don't catch you by surprise in your budget and you have to go into debt for those things. So consider that. Consider setting up sinking funds, however you want to do it. Some people use different checking accounts for sinking funds, and that's fine. We put all of our money into one account, and then we have the sinking fund, and we just don't touch it. It's taken a lot of discipline for me to be able to do that. Chrissy's a saver. I'm more of a saver now, but if I have cash in my pocket, I'm probably going to spend it. So we've trained ourselves that even though we have money in that account, in our checking account, we know that we're living off of what's in our budget and not in our sinking funds. and we count our savings in our sinking funds as well. So we know that there's money there, but we're not touching it because we don't think about it as being there, because we're working off of our budget, our grocery budget, our eating out budget, our tithing budget. All those things, we're working off of those things so that we don't have to touch the money in our sinking funds until we actually need them. So let me encourage you to think about sinking funds, setting them up, and making sure that we're taking care of those expenses before they happen, and that way we're less likely to go into debt. So I hope you've enjoyed this fantastical voyage through sinking funds. I hope it's been informative to you. I hope that you have gleaned something from today's video. If you like more video from us, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that little bell for updates from us. Also, there's going to be some videos floating around here somewhere that you can click on to view more content from us. And don't forget to comment below and tell me how you use sinking funds. How do you plan for life before it happens? And so from all of us here at The Long Run, this is Joel saying bye. We'll see you next time.